This is the E-commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Mr. Omar QARI from Logicbroker, welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Jason.
It's super cool to have you along for the ride today. And we were talking about off air that you said that a couple of years ago when I first got a gimbal, a handheld gimbal, 3-axis gimbal for my walk and talk conversations while I'm out walking my dogs, and sometimes I'll record a quick little snippet. I bought a gimbal specifically because people were saying, I love what you say, but when you do your walk and talks, it's not smooth and it's really hard to follow you. What can you do about that? And I got that gimbal specifically for that. You said, I saw one of those early discussions that you had and it inspired you to go out and get a gimbal yourself.
That's right. That's right. This was like just over a year ago, and I was watching the episode, and you were like, "Hey, I'm trying it out. I'm trying out this gimbal. Well, let me know in the comments if it's any better." And it was just super crisp. And so I was like, "I need one of those so I can do walk and talks."
Yes.
And then I also got one of the tiny mugs to go with it.
Yes.
So then it was off to the races.
I love that. I absolutely love that. No, I tell you, technology has come a long way in a very short period of time, and gimbals are no different. They're technology DJI, and everybody does gimbals now, so it's accessible to everybody. They used to be super expensive. You couldn't touch a gimbal for a couple of grand even a few years ago, and now for $250 you can get a good gimbal. So it is
That's
amazing.
right.
It is amazing. We're not here to talk about gimbals, though. We're here to talk
No.
about Logicbroker. But before we get into that, how did you get into this space of we'll talk a little bit more deeply about Logicbroker, but broad terminology, e-commerce integration, system integration, and a platform to facilitate that. But if I look back across your career, have a bit of an investment background, certainly have a tech background, certainly I would call you a serial entrepreneur, no question about that. Run and built multiple businesses now. So why e-commerce and why now?
Yeah, it's a fair question because it's very non-traditional. I feel like I look around the commerce space and everybody's been in commerce for 20, 25 years, yourself included. And for me, it was a very different path. I co-founded and was CEO of a business called Abacus that we were running for about 7 or 8 years. And once we once we sold the majority of that business to this private equity firm, I decided to stay on for another 4 or 5 years after that. But around that time, it had been like 13 years in this business. We'd been growing it. We'd done 7 or 8 acquisitions, but it was very clear it was time for the next thing. And as I was thinking about what that next business is I wanted to jump into or start, I was thinking about what are those, it wasn't like commerce, it was like, what are those businesses in my current life that have this unfair advantage? And when I was working in fintech, which is what I've been doing for those like 3+ years, enterprise software plus fintech, then there was these companies that had these networks, right? Like a MasterCard or a Visa. And they just always had this very unfair advantage in the space. So when I was looking out into the commerce space and thinking about who is the one that's connecting all the retailers and the suppliers that has this network, the unfair advantage. They're not just a system of record, but they actually are the connective tissue in the space. And that's how I came across Logicbroker. And it felt almost like the Visa or MasterCard of commerce. So I jumped in.
Wow. And to be clear, though, you didn't start Logicbroker. You were
No.
brought in as the CEO to run and grow the business, and you've been there for nearly a year and a half. So how did Logicbroker get its start even before you came into the picture?
Yeah, great question. So Logicbroker has been around for 15+ years. Fantastic founding team between Payman and Kareem and some of these guys. Payman's still on the board. The business actually started as a consulting business, helping these large retailers with all sorts of pain points around their supply chain workflows and things like that. And what ended up happening was they really hit on this one specific pain point around connecting into their suppliers to load up all of the product details and context and inventory availability for the purposes of drop shipping. So Logicbroker really got its start in drop shipping software. But the interesting thing is that over the years, then the customers started asking, if you can pass me this product data and inventory availability so I can put it on my e-commerce site and then have a supplier ship it to a consumer, can you also help me ship it to my store? Can you also help me treat one of my stores as a supplier and then send it to another one of my stores? Can you help me replenish my warehouse from those suppliers? So the whole definition of dropship ended up expanding out into really being multi-party commerce orchestration. And so that's how today Logicbroker is very much focused on being that commerce platform that was just built ground up for multi-party collaboration.
And what's interesting about this is I am seeing a convergence of capabilities and technology in this space, similar to how, if we go back 10 years ago, we saw an amalgamation of search and personalization come under one technical roof because they needed to inform each other. They needed to be able to share data. The experiences overlapped. A lot of intent happens in each one of those three experiences. It just makes sense. You used to have to buy your search platform, your merchandising platform, your personalization platform, and they never spoke to each other. And if you wanted them to speak to each other, there was lots of custom integration involved to be able to allow those systems to share data in a meaningful way. And now, even Nosto, they acquired an enterprise search platform.
Yeah.
Then we have search platforms acquiring merchant personalization or building their own into the platform. So we've seen a lot of consolidation in buckets or areas. It's PIM, MDM, and DAM software, right? You don't really buy a PIM system, a DAM system, and an MDM system. They are typically nowadays, those three sit under one technical roof. And I'm seeing something similar happen in the system integration world, where you used to have iPaaS systems, which were for internal IT and allowing internal systems to share data with one another. Typically, we're talking ERP, PIM, ecom platform, like connecting those three together internally so that they could share data with one another, right? Orders from commerce down to ERP for fulfillment, freight shipment information back up to commerce, PIM, getting base data from ERP, then fully enriched data down to commerce so you could sell the products. And iPaaS systems have historically been an internal use IT tool. Then we had channel management platforms like your channel advisors, or now called Rhythm, and all the different channel management platforms that were out there. And then we had distinct order management and order orchestration platforms that were more or less powerful depending on the scale and size and number of channels of your business. So the likes of the Pipe 17s, et cetera. And maybe you would have an inventory management platform in there if you were really small that was separate, and all it did was manage inventory across channels and take in orders and understand what you had, where, and when. But it feels like now many of these platforms are merging to live under one technical roof, because it makes sense if you think about it, right? So you have an internal iPaaS system, whether I'm connecting to internal systems or an external channel partner or an external OMS or an external WMS or an external marketplace. These are all just system integrations allowing computers to talk to each other and share data with each other. And then we have the final piece of the puzzle, right? Which is we have distributed order management, and we have the need in a multipolar, multi-channel world. We have a scenario where we have physical locations that need to not only receive stock, but potentially sell direct to the consumer, potentially ship, so it becomes a shipping location. It becomes like a mini DC. So then we have distribution centers. We then have all the other channels that we sell through. And in B2B, there's even more than that, because we've got EDI and we've got Punch Out, and we've got all these other sales channels. So we have this order management issue, an order orchestration and routing issue, specifically where we have highly complex aggregated carts where we may have 10 items in a cart, and they have to be shipped from 4 different locations, and we have to track that all the way to the point where it gets to the customer. And then we have to think about reverse logistics in scenarios where we need that. So we have all these 3 buckets of complexity, but yet they all have to usually tap into the same initial data sources to be able to provide these services. So it makes sense that these would come under one technical roof. And then we overlay agentic AI and agentic commerce over the top of that to ease a lot of that data communication, the ETL aspects, the extract, the transform, and the load. Agentic AI has made that significantly easier than it's ever been before. So is that kind of the evolution that you have seen the industry go through as well? And is that shaped the path that Logicbroker has gone down?
It's interesting that you mentioned, because the like had their OMS, they had their WMS, they had their TMS, they had their,
IMS.
PIN, you just name it. And all of these systems, as you noted, they were really set up for internal organization within the organization, right? So if you actually go into the OMS, then any of the information that's actually happening at the suppliers, like that's a black box, right? It's just meant for the internal coordination. And so once you, especially now, as the as you've gone and fragmented how commerce is happening, it's essentially forced the retailers and suppliers to think about tools and solutions that help them to connect with one another, right? Because in a world where you just had a very simple retailer is managing a few suppliers and then there's a store and there's a website, that's one thing. But now in this world where you've got 3PLs, you've got a dozen different channels, maybe 100 different channels. You've got the different marketplaces you're distributing through. You're sourcing from brands. Maybe you've also got some retailers working with other retailers. You've got like the essentially this world where we've moved from what I like to call linear commerce to more multi-party commerce, where everyone is wearing these multiple hats, like a brand. Are they really a brand? Are they a brand or are they a retailer? Are they both? Are they every? And then on top of that, they're also becoming marketplaces themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's happened is the old enterprise software models of these systems of record within an organization really no longer applied. And I think that's exactly what has driven what you were describing, which is that modern commerce essentially needs to coordinate across partners, across even social, right? TikTok Shop and these guys. Now you've got LLMs in the mix. And so what's that meaning? That's leading to this world where as you go further upstream, even the intent is being fragmented. And so there's this whole challenge of how do you orchestrate that? And I think that's forced solutions like Logicbroker to basically come and help tie all of this together.
Yeah, and I think what it also does is it de-risks and decomplexifies the stacks that these businesses need to run. And what that the net effect of that is, at least is what I'm seeing. Same as in the search merchant personalization field. Now, search merchant personalization, which was historically the exclusive domain of major retailers. We're talking those tech stacks were very expensive. You might be spending $500,000 a year on just those 3 licenses alone for those 3 pieces of technology. Then you'd integrate them together. You had to maintain them. You had to integrate them into your commerce experience. You had to integrate them into your point of sale experience. Like you had to integrate them into your ERP. Like you had to integrate them everywhere. And so what used to be the exclusive domain of the biggest brands in the world is now accessible. I wouldn't necessarily say to startups. You're not going to get enterprise software as a startup, but certainly mid-size and larger retailers have access to that technology. The prices come down to the point where it's much more democratic. Many more businesses can access it. It's not a technical black box. They understand it, easy to implement, fast to implement, really rapid time to value. And I feel like that's starting to happen in the distributed integration space, let's call it, just broadly speaking. It feels like technologies like Logicbroker and others are making it to where even as a startup at startup scale, you can have some of these, you can benefit from some of the network effects of this distributed commerce environment. You can benefit from that almost from day one. And it means that you can be a D2C brand, meaning, hey, maybe I've got some products that I make under my own brand, but I'm also maybe an aggregator retailer for some other products so that I have a full catalog or a full solution of products that I can sell into the market. Maybe I sell direct at retail, but I also have retail partners that I sell through that have access to parts of my market that I'll never have access to directly because they're a favorite supplier of a certain customer cohort. So it feels like this is becoming more accessible to more merchants than ever before. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think the other interesting thing about the flattening of the stack is that let's take personalization, for example, right? Great example where it used to be that the personalization systems on these large enterprise retailers, for example, they had access to certain data from the e-commerce platform and from some of the different marketing solutions to target the users in certain ways. But now with the flattening of the systems and greater access deeper into the supply chain, then it's allowed this whole new level of personalization that was not previously possible. So before, they might, if you go and you're on Best Buy's website or something like that, or Dick's Sporting Goods, then you would go on and maybe it would only have visibility into what they wanted to promote, but it wasn't taking into account what was in stock or what's actually going to ship the fastest to that consumer, where the supplier has the highest level of reliability, or the lowest cost of delivery. And now there's actually this opportunity to create those much more granular personalized experiences that tie together that level of intricacy. It's similarly impacting how these large retailers are advertising. Like now you can even have ads that are based on your real-time inventory availability, and you can
And
have real-time.
regional and geofencing to go along with it.
Yes.
Which is pretty exciting to see the market evolving to that point. But let's take one specific example, I think, where technology like yours helps these businesses to ultimately provide a better customer experience. So let's say I'm on the Dick's Sporting Goods website. Let's say I order a pair of Nike shoes and I want it to be delivered to my house. I want it to be delivered to my door. It's an e-commerce order. I'm not going to do click and collect and go pick it up from the shop. And let's say Dick's Sporting Goods, because they have DCs, plus they ship from store, plus they allow click and collect from store, and it's all based on real-time inventory. But then for certain products and certain orders, they will do effectively a drop ship model where they say, okay, we normally carry this shoe, but we're out of your size or out of your colorway in your region. We can't get it to you quickly or easily. And so we're going to pass that order directly onto Nike for direct fulfillment, and they're going to ship that pair of shoes directly to your house. Now, without an understanding of inventory of that particular SKU that might be inbound to a store or DC, and then be able to compare that with a rules-based order of, okay, cool, on average, it takes Nike, if we give them an order and they ship direct to our customer, on average, it gets to our customer in 3 days. Okay, cool. But we've got an inbound shipment that's due tomorrow into our local store. We will fulfill it same day. It will arrive the next day. So it will get to the customer in 2 days instead of 3. Okay. Oh, and by the way, because we're shipping it from our internal stock, we capture the entire retail margin, as opposed to if it's drop shipped, we lose margin to Nike because they're fulfilling it directly on our behalf. So we get charged a premium for that service, and therefore we don't make as much margin. So these are the types of decision-making scenarios, not just from a distributed order management perspective, but from just a stock, inventory, customer service perspective. There's a lot of variables that come into making that kind of decision. If you're having to make tens of thousands of those decisions a day, there is no way you can do that manually. It's impossible.
That's right. That's right. Nailed it. It's literally something that up until systems existed like Logicbroker to have the actual visibility into the 3PLs, the logistics, the inventory, the what's in your warehouse, what's in and which distribution center is that coming from. You couldn't do that kind of sophisticated orchestration. And now you can. You can actually say, oh, okay, that's exactly as you said, like that consumer, we really want to optimize to get it to them as fast as possible. And so maybe we reroute something that was going to go to the warehouse. Maybe we reroute that to the store that's closest to the consumer, and then we end up sending it to there. Or maybe it does make sense to have Nike drop ship it. And there's so many different permutations. But now the exciting thing is that because of the kinds of orchestration and the sophistication of that's possible, it's also opening up entirely new channels. It's encouraging retailers to work with more suppliers than they had been before, and to expand out how they're thinking about that, because there is also that balance of the balance sheet risk, right? So if you go back to during COVID, it was a real boom time for exactly this type of orchestration, because a lot of these retailers and brands themselves were getting stuck with a ton of inventory, even though if you look across the system, across the market, there would have been plenty of opportunities to actually meet the needs of the demand at the time. But it really forced everyone to think about, what do I need to hold in the warehouse? And should I be experimenting with these new products first with a dropship model, and then using that to inform what I want to keep in the warehouse versus what I dropship, and also opening up a whole extended aisle for consumers coming into the store, where a sales associate could say, we don't carry that here, but we can have it out to your house in a day or two.
Yeah, and I think there is nuance in some instances also where rules-based a purely rules-based system. So if we think of deterministic versus probabilistic systems, there's a big difference between those two. In a deterministic system, you must have rules to cover every single potential scenario that the system is likely to encounter. Now that's virtually impossible, right? For example, even if Logicbroker received, it's got the tracking number of a freight shipment coming from Nike to Dick's Sporting Goods or whatever it is, and we know the tracking is saying the due date is the next day, but then there is a storm that hits, or the truck blows a tire, or something or a flight's delayed, or whatever. So even though we, in theory, think we know what's happening, a shipment, and we think we know with 90% certainty it's going to arrive into our warehouse on this day, we can't then have a secondary rule to then readapt how that order gets managed. Once it's down the happy path of fulfillment, that it has to continue down that path in a deterministic model, because we don't have an adaptive model. I guess agentic commerce, in my mind, means that we can move for many things, not for everything. For some raw number calculations and things, it can't be probabilistic. It has to be deterministic, of course. For finance, we got to be dealing with reality, not some potential reality. But for many things, including distributed order management, a probabilistic model is actually better, because it means that it is by definition less rigid. By definition, it's more flexible. By definition, it can adapt on the fly. By definition, the moment that a new piece of data comes in, okay, cool, we polled that company's API, the freight company's API, we in near real time, or maybe we're subscribed to their webhook, so we got literally a notification the moment that truck got a flat tire. We got notified. So now we've got to adjust everything that happens downstream from there based on the outcome that we're trying to achieve. So instead of determining an outcome based on rules, it's now an outcome based on probabilistic outcomes of that being able to happen in the given environment, with the given circumstances and the data that we have to hand, right? And so as I see it, and I'd love your take on this, that is where AI and large language models and predictive algorithms really start to come into their own, and that's why they are inherently more scalable.
Yes, it is interesting to see all the press, all the talk around agentic commerce has really been around this very thin sliver of consumer agents, right? Like the ones that are going to be your personal shopper, that are going to go and help you buy the better dress for the wedding and things like that. And ironically, it's the piece that's going to have literally the lowest impact, because frankly, there's a number of reasons people actually like to shop. In some cases, it's like therapeutic.
Like my wife is not going to let ChatGPT place an order for her. It's not even interesting to her.
Right. But now imagine the e-commerce manager, or whoever is sitting there on the actually orchestrating the supply chain and everything that's happening. Now for them, there's your great example, which is around the actual order orchestration itself, where exactly as you said, up until recently, it was a whole bunch of if this, then that rules, right? That's how it was working. There would be a certain number of permutations, but after a certain point, it would just get like ridiculous. And so now we can actually have these agents that will be continually monitoring the situation and be able to catch, it could be in the middle of the night, like this webhook fires, or it's going out and actually checking what is the status of that. The SLA was to deliver it by this time, where it, based on the fact that it's stuck in Columbus, means that it's not going to get there on time. Where else can I get this from?
Yes.
Does it mean that I even need to go and source it from a different supplier?
Yes.
Because that same product is also sold at this other supplier. So huge opportunities to create a significantly better consumer experience for these large retailers and brands. But then if you think about it, even if you step back to earlier in the journey, think about the supplier onboarding in the first place. So the supplier onboarding, it was something that could take months to get a supplier onboarded. There's credit checks, there's all sorts of back and forth conversations, there's sharing the product data. Oh, this is not valid, connecting to the EDI, like doing everything that needs to happen. And now you've got these agents that can basically do the heavy lifting and unblock it as soon as something gets blocked, where it's like, all right, this failed. You had these failed docs for these reasons. I can resolve these 10 for you. These ones, I just need these 3 inputs from you, and then everything will be back up and we'll be cranking along in the actual onboarding process. And it's shrinking the amount of time it can take a retailer to onboard a new supplier, which means faster opportunity to generate revenue earlier and to onboard even more suppliers. So it's a very exciting time actually on the back end for agentic commerce.
Well, and I think we are finally, not every freight fulfillment, middle mile, last mile, carrier, et cetera, can do this yet, but many can, especially the global fulfillment partners, the FedExes, et cetera. They can do dynamic rerouting via API now, meaning that it used to be, okay, you determined the origination and you determined the destination. And once that was locked into the route, that's it. It cannot be changed until it hits the final destination or the parcel gets lost and you make an insurance claim. Now, via API, we can do dynamic rerouting. So in that case where, okay, it's stuck in Columbus, now the retailer via automated system might decide, hey, instead of that, we know it's going to take an extra 2 days now because there's a snowstorm in Columbus. So it's going to take an extra 2 days to get to our customer. So let's reroute it to our DC instead, because it doesn't matter, give or take 2-3 days to get to our DC, who cares? It's just going to go into our standard inventory stock once it arrives, whenever it arrives. But we're now going to either ship out of our local DC or a local 3PL partner, or drop ship from the supplier directly, because we know it's going to come from LA, right? And we now know it can get to them overnight. Now we can dynamically reroute that shipment mid-shipment. Now, obviously, after certain waypoints, you can't reroute from one place to, if it's in Mexico, you can't reroute necessarily back to the US. But there is a certain amount of restreaming, which is, I think, what the term they use in the industry. They can restream those parcels to different hubs, for example, and to different destinations mid-delivery. Now, that's something that really has only been possible within the last couple of years, with kind of all of them having APIs, almost all of them having some form of webhook infrastructure, all of them having some sort of re-injection, restreaming capabilities. Like, you might pay for it. You might pay a service fee for that. But the fact of the matter is, just the fact that you can do it means that there is so much more flexibility in the overall logistics world that this changes the game quite radically versus the very rigid systems of even a few years ago.
Yeah, the combination of that already existing, plus then even over just the last 6 months, 9 months, all of the capabilities for agents to be able to take this semantic context and be able to make decisions, or for us to even train them on a customer by customer basis around what are the business rules and expectations that this retailer wants versus this retailer. It's really opened up, frankly, a whole new opportunity to create these magical consumer experiences that were not possible before. Like, when a consumer previously would have had to sit there and then the retailer would be like, we see it's stuck, we can't do anything about it. Now it actually empowers the retailer to create almost like a Disney-like experience of, I'm going to wow you with with something that previously used to be viewed as very rigid and something that was not in our control. Now we can actually do something about it, and then that's going to create that additional brand equity. It's going to get the consumers to trust that retail. So it's become a competitive weapon to differentiate yourself in the market, to lean into these types of capabilities. Yeah.
And how important to this outcome that we're starting to get into the realms of what feels like magic in some respects,
Mm-hmm.
right? How important do you think standards like MCP are
Mm-hmm.
to this outcome? Now, the reason I ask that is because most of the tooling that I use now, even the SaaS software that I'm subscribed to, they either have MCP servers in beta or have a date where they're going to release their own MCP server. And I'll give you one example. Read AI just released their own MCP server. Now, that thing is amazing because I now can integrate that into my Claude Code projects. I can integrate that into my Manus projects. I can query any data from any of my recordings via their MCP server and ask questions of that data with and initially only pull down the metadata of the date, the time, the title, who attended, whatever, and then be able to ask further questions, deeper questions based on my agent, my preferred choice of agent. Doesn't matter where that agent originates. Doesn't matter what that agent is named. Could be a custom agent that I build. Now I can semantically ask that MCP server human-like questions, and it will
Mm-hmm.
give me a human-like response just
Yeah.
because they have sat an MCP server in front of their APIs, and you can see it. They use their own MCP server. I can tell in the UI if I log into my control panel, I start asking questions of my content, my recorded content, of my transcripts. It's giving me the same answers that I would get through asking the MCP server
Yeah.
via an agent, right? So they're
Yeah.
using their own MCP server to be able to provide an agentic experience in their own UI, but it's
Yeah.
allowing agents to talk to them and get information in totally normal human ways that before we had, and I know because I tried to connect to Read AI before through their API layer, and you have to read their API docs, you have to understand the structure of their calls. You can only make very specific calls within a very specific context. There's only certain types of data that you can request. It has to be formatted perfectly, otherwise you will get an error in the response. Like, it just feels like MCP, okay, maybe it's not a silver bullet, but it
Mm-hmm.
feels like that is moving us from the API era to the agentic era. That is what has helped us bridge that chasm in a way.
Yeah, it's interesting. So it was very exciting how quickly everyone aligned around the MCP protocol. I actually hope that related to UCP and ACP and
ACP.
all these others, we quickly align around a protocol for that as well.
Yep.
But around MCP in particular, it was interesting because I would have expected, right? So let's take an example. When we took our APIs and we made them all available via MCP, and our customers were able to essentially chat with their orchestration solution, then the very quick thing we learned was that they were thinking, "Hey, can you just do this for me?" And so initially, it was they'd have to think of, what do I need to care about?
Mm-hmm.
And then ask the MCP server to basically pass that through, and then they'd get a response. And then a lot of the thinking was still on the actual users.
Yes.
And what I was surprised by how quickly has evolved, and even just in the last 3 months or so, is how much of that thinking we can help be much more proactive versus reactive. So the initial use cases of MCP was very reactive. Like the
Yes.
user would have to think about it,
Yep.
they'd pass it through, and it would be like, how many failed docs do I have? Okay, what type are they? Okay, let's work through this together. And it was a helpful coworker to do that, but it was almost like a glorified UI using natural language.
Mm-hmm.
Now with agents, we've basically been able to get to the point where we can do a lot of that heavy lifting up front. So we can proactively say, hey, I've identified that you have all these failed docs. These are the suppliers that are the number one contributors to those. Do you want me to draft a message to send out to those suppliers just the things that I cannot resolve. And it's at the point where the retailer can basically say or no. They're truly acting now like a conductor of an orchestra. Previously, they really still were the musicians themselves. And it's interesting how quickly it's moved from just purely chatting with your MCP to now agents being able to do a lot of this heavy lifting.
Yeah, it is crazy how fast this has happened, but I think the industry has learned its lesson. And even with the coming of Onyx, the order network exchange, and the standardized protocol there, I think the industry has found that over the last 30 years, a lack of standardized protocols that see wide adoption means that the industry, it stagnates, right? The industry is hobbled. Anytime that scenario is allowed to go on for too long, it hurts the industry in the long term. It took many years, way too long, for us to standardize on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for the web. It took way too long. I remember the days of frames in the beginning. So the fact that it took us that long to move from Flash and frames and all those other early web technologies to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript as the backbone of the internet, and the standalone URL is the backbone of the internet. Like the fact that it took us 15 years to get to that place where that was a standard. I think the industry has learned its lesson in the sense that, hey, if we want to see wide adoption of this technology, which is actually going to make our lives easier as tech vendors too, it doesn't just make the user's life easier, it makes our life easier too, because we don't have to custom code all this deterministic bullshit in our platforms, right? And create this hyper complex rules engine to cater for every single Tom, Dick, and Harry scenario. Great thing is, don't have to do that anymore. For many things, it can be probabilistic, right? We can use MCPs and we can use our APIs plugged into MCPs to be able to make most of this stuff happen in a natural language way. And it means that the amount of custom coding we have to do is greatly decreased. And even where
you know what's funny? What's funny is that it's actually become, even though that is happening, and I agree that's happening, it's almost become less relevant than ever, because now with Claude Code and all these capabilities, we could have 10 different formats, and we could easily map to all the protocols in parallel. And the speed at which we're able to do that makes it where it's almost an afterthought as to how many protocols we need to match this up in.
Yes. It is a truly exciting time. These generic agents like Manus, for example, I have been literally blown away. It breaks my heart that they were acquired by Meta, and I really hope they don't screw this up. But like the generic agents and even Claude Code, Claude Cowork, etc., the more generic the agent is, it's astounding of what not a very technical non-coder, which is me, the amount of stuff that I can achieve with co-agents helping me. It's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. And it has progressed even in the last 12 months. It's gotten wilder. Like, it's pretty impressive.
Absolutely. In the last 3 months alone, we've gone to the point where now you've got the agent can literally control your computer for you. The amount of productivity from just internally within the organization is wild. And it's interesting because when a lot of these CIOs and kind of CTOs at these large retailers and brands and things like that, we meet with them regularly. And it's interesting because on the one hand, they're rethinking the whole buy, build, partner, right? Because in their heads, they're like, oh, wait, like now is this the right time where instead of buying previously, we should actually now be building ourselves? And what we've seen is that initially they start going in that direction. And in some cases, it's really healthy. Like they actually do end up building things that otherwise they would have asked for some totally custom thing from their enterprise software partner to do. And that's great. Like they should build those types of things. But on the other hand, they're realizing some of the things that they're building, they're like, oh, who's going to maintain this? Like, and who's going to handle all the compliance related to this? And so I think it's actually creating a very healthy dynamic where some of the really mission critical things they're still looking to partners for and they're still looking to buy. Whereas some of the things that are super custom to them, they're thinking, oh, maybe I am empowered now using the APIs, using these different tools to go and build myself.
And what's next for you guys? If you were to look out 6, 12, 18 months from now, I know it's a little bit crystal ball-ish, especially in an AI first world now. Is there anything that your customers are asking you to do today that you don't yet do that you will do in 6, 12, 18 months? Or like what's on your
Yeah.
roadmap that really excites you?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
after 15 years, a lot of software companies would call it good, and they'd be like, "Nah, we're good. We dominate in our space, and we're pretty happy to almost go into maintenance mode." But with AI, it feels like founder mode and build mode are more accessible than ever before now.
That's right. This, like for me, and maybe it's because I'm a recovering founder, but this has been literally an opportunity to create a refounding moment at the company where previously we thought of ourselves in this narrow lane of onboarding, orchestration related to this multi-party commerce. But if you think about the network of the tens of thousands of trading partners that are working with us, what I've been pushing the team on is, guys, listen, like we don't need to be restricted. In the past, if you think of product development, then there was a lot of pressure around focus, and you needed to focus because in order to be 10 times better than everything else out there, you needed to be really great at this one particular thing. And now, in a world where the actual development effort is like it's asymptotically approaching zero, then what actually matters is like taste, judgment. What are the projects that you're going to be working on? And so for us now, it's basically land grab for all of the manual effort and pain that our customers are going through. So historically, if we were onboarding like 100 suppliers, then our customers would say, great, like you've shrunk the supplier onboarding time from X months to X weeks. But what about all the time before that when we're just trying to negotiate the commercial agreements with the suppliers, when we're trying to go and do all the checks on whether we should be working with them in the first place? That still takes us months internally within our organization to decide on. And at Logicbroker, from our perspective, we're like, actually, we could probably do that as well. Like we can basically absorb more and more of this manual work because we actually have the agents and the ability to do that. Like for us to create an agent that would then go and negotiate the agreement between the supplier and the retailer, of course, with the retailer and suppliers like supervision, that's something that could drastically increase the number of suppliers they're working with and the onboarding time to drive that down. So for us, it's really a focus on what is that last mile, right? Like when everybody rolled out broadband, then initially there was a huge overbuild of broadband when the internet was like really trying to make that transition, but nobody wanted to handle the last mile because it was so painful. And so everybody had still really slow connections and the bandwidth was still very low. And now it's a similar situation where enterprise software has helped to basically be that broadband layer, but nobody wanted to do the last mile. Nobody wanted to go and do the work. That's why you have so many humans in the loop still using the enterprise software. But now with agents, that is the path to going and collapsing the last mile to say you can literally just be the orchestrators. Like you don't need to be the one still clicking and copying and pasting from Excel and doing all that manual last mile effort.
I love that. I love that. Just empowerment and enablement, I think, is without the operator needing to be an absolute 30-year expert
Yes.
in what they're doing.
Yes.
And I think that changes the accessibility game. How do you guys make your money? You're a SaaS platform, SaaS technology integrated into all these people's systems via APIs and MCP servers. Is it per document? Is it per shipment? Is it per integration endpoint? A combination of all of the above? Is there tiers? How do you engage with your customers?
Yeah, it's basically a platform fee plus some percentage of GMV. In some case, it could be like dollar per order, but very simple pricing model, very much trying to tie ourselves to and our customers' interests together. Like from our perspective, if we can drive down supplier onboarding times, if we can ramp up the GMV that they're able to generate, then that should be a win.
Love it. Love it. What's the best way to get a hold of you? I will drop a link to your LinkedIn profile and the Logicbroker website into the show notes. Other than that, how do you like people to reach out and have a conversation about some of the things we talked about today?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got come visit logicbroker.com. And then on top of that, we're hosting a conference that's coming up, which is the Logicbroker Connected Commerce Conference. It's really an industry event that's happening May 7th in New York, and would love people to come out and check that out. But otherwise, we've got a lot of places they can reach out to us at logicbroker.com.
I love it. If you could sprinkle your brand of fairy dust on our industry, the e-commerce space, and you could change one thing at the snap of your fingers, what would it be?
So one of the things we were talking about around aligning all the protocols and things like that, if you look at product data right now in this industry, what a mess.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah.
I mean, oh my God, the talk about things that haven't been able to in decades get normalized and get on the same page. But
Standardized.
yeah, if I could snap my fingers and standardize that, like what a massive benefit it would be to everyone. Our hope is to try to approximate that by receiving it through all these fragmented ways, and then we're normalizing it, but that would be a huge boon to the industry.
Yeah, to your earlier point, is soon, is that going to be necessary, desirable? Does it even matter because we can translate between types and mappings and
Yeah.
abbreviations and standardization? We can create our own internal standard and move everything into that standard seamlessly. I don't know. I don't know what that looks like in the future. I don't even know what the future of PIM or search merchant personalization looks like in a world where we can dump a whole data store into a vector database and query it directly for answers without structuring it, without mapping it, without doing anything to it. I can upload a 100-page PDF today to any of my favorite LLMs and start asking it questions about it instantly. It's an interesting time to be alive, and it's an interesting time to be in this industry. I think over the next 6, 12, 18 months, there are going to be some massive advancements in our industry, but I
Oh
think
yeah.
the emergence of some more common standards, MCP, ACP, UCP, Onyx, etc., we're getting there. We're not there yet, but I
Yeah.
definitely think there are some very interesting standards coming to our industry that's going to make this a heck of a lot easier for businesses to adopt internally.
Yeah. Yeah. And my hope is that even though a lot of the early adoption has been around B2C,
Yes,
my hope is that for B2B, in many ways, it's even more powerful
totally.
because the complexity of the product catalogs and like this is tailor made to add so much value in B2B. And we have B2B industrial distribution customers, and they tend to be not as much leaning in as, let's say, some of the
Not as
B2C folks.
advanced.
Yes, but imagine the amount of impact it could have on B2B. So
I'm
hopeful
excited
for
about
the
it.
future.
For example, I was never excited about headless in retail. I think it's totally a waste most of the time. But
Yeah.
headless in B2B also makes more
Mm.
sense than it does in retail because we've got these channels that historically have not been commerce enabled in any way. Email, Slack, Teams, WhatsApp, these traditional communication channels that have not been commerce enabled. And now with headless commerce, we can commerce enable them. We can search enable
Yeah,
them. We can
yeah.
agentically enable them. And that is very exciting. For someone that now works exclusively in the B2B world, it's super exciting to see the emergence of some of this technology that is just making my clients' lives easier on the daily. It's very exciting and it's speeding up. And where we used to have to adapt mostly retail platforms for use in B2B, and we used to have to
Mhm.
customize the crap out of them to make that possible. Now there's bespoke, dedicated B2B technology that's just for manufacturers, distributors, wholesalers, and some of it's verticalized, some of it's very niche specific, and it's really exciting to see. And AI is helping with that significantly, right? So very exciting time to be in this space. Couldn't agree more. Now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, we've been speaking for nearly an hour. It's absolutely flown by. It's been a great discussion. This is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you. I get to let
Mhm.
you ask me one
Yeah.
question, any question that you like. It can be personal or professional. So, Mr. Omar Kari from
Yes.
Logicbroker, what is your question for me today?
I do have a question for you. So, I've been in B2B e-commerce for 25 years, right? And you've probably watched dozens of these different technology cycles play out. In your gut, I'm very curious, are agents in commerce, is it a genuine inflection point? Is it a real like step change like the internet or mobile? Or do you think in 10 years from now it'll look like one more thing that the industry overclaimed?
No, I think it's a real thing. I think that we're still early in the process. And so even platforms like Jagger, Coupa, Ariba, the major e-procurement platforms out there, they're still early in their agentic journey, but they're already signaling to the market that their goal is to completely agentically enable procurement, where sure, there can be a human in the loop, but not necessarily required, and it's going to do a lot of the work that the human does today to make their job easier and faster from a procurement perspective. Like they want to effectively get to a place where somebody could upload a set of plans. Let's say I'm a property developer. I could upload a set of plans to my agentic procurement system. I could then effectively take that set of plans, break that out into a procurement list, send that off via MCP to a supplier, all agentically say, here's the plans or here's the buy list. What can you supply? When can you supply it? What's our price? How fast can you get it to us, etc. And they want to agentically enable that entire procurement process. So I look at agentic kind of as EDI 2.0. And EDI, there's a lot of agentic first EDI platforms that are coming to the fore now, that because EDI is not a single standard, it's 20 standards, and it's been around for 60 years, it's a bit ugly. Like the way that EDI typically works without agents easing that integration process, it's messy. It's messy, right? And so I think agentic commerce is going to come to B2B bigger, faster, and earlier than it's actually going to come to retail e-commerce. That's what I see. Because as you rightly pointed out right in the beginning, there is so much to do with the visceral, personal, emotional experience of retail shopping. B2B is very clinical in the sense that it's a job to be done. It's a procurement job. I'm getting paid to do procurement in my role, right? In that world, getting it done faster, easier, more efficiently, especially in B2B where 4% net margins, 5% net margins are common. If you can claw back a half a point in procurement costs because of agentic automation, that is material in the B2B world. It's not saving a half a point in the retail world, not so material, where net margins 20, 30, 40%, right? And they start out with 75% gross margins. And so it's just a different world, right? I think agentic is going to impact retail faster from a marketing perspective, from a product market fit perspective, from a product iteration perspective. Like, I think it's going to affect that part of the retail world sooner than agentic buying is going to impact that world. Because I sure, for some things, maybe for toilet paper or for my weekly grocery run or something like that, maybe I would have an agent just go and do that stuff for me. But so much of retail shopping is experiential, and I just think that it's going to be really hard to convince people to go and get Gemini or Grok or ChatGPT or whatever to go and make purchases for them. I think that's going to be a hard sell for the foreseeable.
Well said. Interesting take.
Listen, super, super cool chatting with you today. I really appreciate your time. Wish you every continuing success with Logicbroker, and I can't wait to speak to you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jason. Great speaking to you.
Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.